Let's talk about the Sixth Amendment, because the same people screaming due process about illegal immigration are using the Constitution like a costume. And I'm not saying due process isn't real. I'm saying they're selling you the wrong kind of due process on purpose. Because the Sixth Amendment is part of what we call the rights of the accused. It's the Constitution's way of saying if the government is going to prosecute you, it doesn't get to act like a tyrant. It doesn't get to drag your case out forever. It doesn't get to do it in secret. It doesn't get to decide your fate behind closed doors. So the Sixth Amendment gives you the right to a speedy and public trial, an impartial jury, the right to confront witnesses, the power to compel witnesses for your defense, and the right to counsel. That's the point. Fair process, transparent process, and this is the part nobody wants to emphasize, timely process. Here's where the scam starts. When activists say illegals have a right to due process, most people hear Sixth Amendment. They hear free lawyer, jury trial, the whole criminal court package. But immigration removal is usually handled as a civil or administrative process, not a criminal prosecution. So the Sixth Amendment public defender setup generally doesn't apply the same way. In immigration court, the rule is typically this: you can have a lawyer, but you pay for it, unless a nonprofit, a local program, or a special category provides one. So no, it's not automatically everybody gets a taxpayer-funded attorney. But don't relax, because even when taxpayers aren't paying the lawyer bill, taxpayers are still paying for the machine. Judges, court staff, interpreters, hearings, continuances, paperwork, enforcement operations, detention or alternatives to detention, years of administrative overhead. And that's before we even get to the downstream costs of a society that has to translate everything into every language on the planet. Now, let's get something straight. Illegal entry is a crime under federal law. But the government often uses civil immigration court to decide removability because it's faster than trying to run a full criminal trial for everyone. That's the theory. Expediency. But here's the problem. The minute you release people into the interior, the system stops being expedient. It becomes a delay factory. And this is where the Sixth Amendment connects, because the Sixth Amendment was designed to prevent the government from ruining a citizen's life through endless, drawn-out prosecution. But the immigration system has been flipped so that endless process protects the lawbreaker and bills the public. Think about what delay does. Delay makes facts stale. Delay makes addresses change. Delay makes people disappear. Delay creates "I didn't get notice." Delay creates continuances. Delay creates appeals. Delay creates new claims. Delay creates new paperwork. Delay creates new humanitarian narratives. Delay creates a whole new storyline. And then the same people who built the mess point at the mess and say, sorry, due process. That's not due process. That's weaponized delay. Now let's talk about the amnesty angle, because this is the part that ties it all together. Liberals always come back to the same move. They let the system get overwhelmed. They let people disappear into the interior. They normalize the chaos. And then, right on schedule, they start the amnesty plea. And why do people disappear into the interior? Because they understand incentives. If you can get in, stay long enough, and wait for the next political forgiveness moment, then delay becomes your best friend. The longer you stay, the harder enforcement gets. The longer you stay, the more sympathetic your story becomes. The longer you stay, the more rooted you look. The longer you stay, the more the system is pressured to say, well, we can't do anything now. That's the game. Now, do they get citizenship like candy? Here's the reality. Amnesty is usually not instant citizenship. It's typically a legal status upgrade, lawful presence, work authorization, sometimes a green card path. Then citizenship is a later step. And when someone applies for naturalization, the formal requirements are generally the same. An application, English and civics testing with some exemptions, residency requirements, good moral character, and the oath. So no, it's not always literally citizenship like candy on day one. But here's the problem. The reward is still being handed out after the original act was disrespecting the law. And the cultural message is still the same. Cross illegally, disappear, delay, wait. And eventually politics will catch up and bless it. That's why the amnesty talk is so toxic, because it turns citizenship from an earned commitment into a political prize. Now let's hit the assimilation piece, because this is where taxpayers get hit twice. For citizenship, English and civics are generally required. But for legal status, short of citizenship, English and civics are often not the gate. So you can end up with large populations living long-term in enclaves where the institutions adapt around them. Translation services, multilingual notices, interpreters, contractors, school system stretched, court system stretched, healthcare system stretched. And don't miss the irony. The same people who scream about equity for citizens will happily build a permanent translation state that working taxpayers fund because the system refused to enforce the law early. Here's the mic drop. If you reward illegal entry with endless process, you don't get compassion. You get a bill that goes to the people who followed the rules.